Buying a used car sucks. I mean, first you gotta go and talk to this guy, and you know he's looking to try to scam you out of your money. And then even once you make your purchase, you're gonna be driving around scared for the next few months, wondering if they sold you a lemon and if this car is gonna leave you stranded on the side of the road somewhere. Hi everyone, my name is Ben, and this channel is dedicated to all things personal finance, helping you earn more, spend less, and invest the difference. Now today we're going to be talking about the proper way to go about doing your research when buying a used car so that you don't overspend and you make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for. Now, with the exception of your house, your car is usually the most expensive item that you will ever own, so it's very important that you get this purchase right. You don't want to overspend, you don't want to buy a busted up lemon, you want to get this right. So these are the 4 things that everyone should research before they ever make that purchase of a used car. Number 1, you're going to want to go online and you're going to want to research the fundamentals of this particular car that you're looking for. You're going to want to check the price, the reliability, the safety, all that kind of stuff. Now, I don't want to get too much into the price or negotiations with the salesman or anything like that in this video. I plan on doing a whole separate video dedicated just to that. So if you're interested in that, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification. But I will say, as far as price goes, a lot of times people simplify the price down to the monthly payment. Right? So we don't want to think about buying a $10,000 used car. Instead, we like to think of it as, well, what's my monthly payment going to be? Is it going to be $300, $500? Like, what's my monthly payment on this car? But no matter what you determine to be an appropriate budget for your car, make sure that your overall budget has room where you are consistently putting money away for savings, retirement, your kids' college fund, that kind of stuff. Because if your overall budget is not consistently allowing you to put money away into savings, then you need to lower your expectations for the budget of this car. So maybe instead of getting a $400 car like you thought, maybe you just get a $300 car and find some other places in your life where you can maybe cut back a little bit. That way you can set up this savings. So like I said, I don't want to get too much into the price side of things in this video, but other than that, you're going to also want to research the reliability, the safety, and then any kind of weird defects that this car might have. And you're just going to go on and start Googling the particular make and model that you're interested in buying. So for example, some brands of vehicles are just notorious for being well put together. Mazda consistently ranks at the top for having the least issues. Like, these cars are just well put together, regardless of what you think about Mazda as a brand or how they look or anything like that. These cars don't break very often. On the flip side, some of the most unreliable cars are typically like the Lincoln Town Car. These things break every other block as you're driving them down the road, it seems. Safety is always a big concern, so make sure it meets whatever kind of safety criteria that you guys have. Now, beyond just is the car reliable or not, you also want to check and see what exactly is breaking on the particular make and model of your car, because sometimes you might be surprised. There can be some really crazy stuff going on. So for example, at one point I owned a 2006 Mustang, and I love that car. It was great. But whoever was designing that particular make and model of the car, like, I don't know what they were thinking when they thought that, hey, this is a good place to put the spark plugs. It's terrible. So I had owned that car for a couple of years, and it was time that I go in and get it serviced and get the spark plugs replaced. And just to get the spark plugs replaced, the mechanic was quoting me $600 for spark plugs. Now, I thought that mechanic was crazy and was trying to rip me off, so I immediately took it to a different mechanic, and that mechanic said the exact same price. $600 for spark plugs. So apparently the spark plugs are in a weird position where you gotta disassemble a lot of the front part of the car just in order to get to the spark plugs. And those spark plugs are notorious for breaking off inside the motor, and if that happens, well, now in addition to the $600 that it was gonna cost you, now you're looking at basically a full engine rebuild. All for spark plugs. Number 2, once you've got all of that stuff figured out, you're going to want to go online and start browsing dealerships in your area and see what kind of inventory they got. Now the good news is a lot of car dealerships will post pretty good pictures of the vehicle, and they will also include a free Carfax report for that vehicle. Now Carfax is fantastic. It's going to show you sort of the history of that car, how many owners it's had, how many miles it's had. It's going to show you if it's ever been in any accidents or when was it last serviced. I guess sort of the overall history of your vehicle. So you're definitely going to want to check out the Carfax report. Now, a few things to kind of keep an eye out for. They're not necessarily deal breakers, but you do need to be aware of them. So if the car was previously a rental car, that can sometimes be a red flag, because let's be real, a lot of people use and abuse rental cars, right? Especially if it's a sports car. So we know that rental cars typically get driven pretty hard. So whatever kind of mileage that car has, you can assume that it's been beat up more than a different vehicle that was not a rental car. And in theory, Carfax should report any sort of accidents that this vehicle has been involved in. And that can be important because while they may have fixed the car cosmetically, like it looks nice, underneath some of the key important pieces and the frame and the bodywork and all that kind of stuff, sometimes that can be warped or twisted or smushed. So even though the outside, the bodywork of it looks good, sometimes the interior, the inner workings of it were never really put back together quite right. And you know, if it's a bent frame, then that can never really be repaired. And so sometimes that can cause long-term problems, some secondary issues because of that unrepaired damage. A lot of times, simply the fact that a car has been involved in a car accident, that will automatically bring the Kelley Blue Book price value of that particular vehicle down by about 10%. So even though that car may have been fixed at a body shop or something like that, it's still worth probably about 10% less than the exact same make and model of a car that was not involved in an accident. And here's where sometimes that can come back to bite you. Because companies know that the value of a vehicle is suddenly going to drop as soon as it shows up on a Carfax report. And so that can sometimes lead people to not want accidents to show up on a Carfax report. And this is especially true if it was previously owned by like a rental car company or something like that, some sort of an agency, a corporate car, a fleet car, something like that. Because this corporation or this rental car company, they know that at some point they're going to sell this car, and so they want to get top dollar for this car, so they don't want it to suddenly lose 10% just because it's been in an accident if they've already fixed it. And that can cause sometimes things to not get reported to Carfax. So you definitely want to check Carfax, but don't necessarily rely on it as being the true gospel. So for example, if we take a look at this 2020 pickup truck, we can look at the Carfax report and we see that it's had 2 previous owners, and one of them was a rental car company. It looks like it was only a rental for about 4 months, so that may not be terrible. And otherwise, the Carfax report shows that it hasn't been in anything crazy, right? Like there's no glaring red flags. But if you just take the vehicle's VIN number and copy and paste it into Google or some of these other search engines, you might be surprised what you find. So for example, I took that pickup truck's VIN number and plugged it into vincheckup.com. And here we can see that this database is actually throwing some red flags. It's showing some incidents and it's showing some maintenance problems and things like that. Now, unfortunately, I can't see what exactly it's showing without purchasing the report. It costs about $15 to buy this report. I'm not affiliated with vincheckup.com or anything like that. But if you're purchasing this particular vehicle and Carfax says it's good, but some other database says, whoa, wait a minute, like there's some stuff going on. In that case, spending $15 to find out what's going on with that vehicle makes a lot of sense. So obviously check Carfax, but also check Google and a couple of other search engines just to make sure that there isn't any missing data that's not showing up on the Carfax report. And if there is anything missing, if you had found something significant on this other search result, make sure you print that off and take that to the dealership. And if you are still interested in purchasing that vehicle, make sure that they reduce the price of that vehicle, because they're pricing it based on the fact that there was no problem with this vehicle, it's never been in an accident, and here you have proof that this vehicle was in an accident, so they need to lower the price for it. All right, so the vehicle checks out, at least online. The next step is to go and actually see it in person. And so when you get there, you're going to want to check the vehicle out, both the exterior and the interior, make sure there's not any dents or defects, scratches on it, or at least nothing major enough that's going to stop you from potentially buying this car. And then you're going to want to jump in and give it a test drive. Now, a lot of times when people test drive the car, they just kind of go around the block a couple of times and they pull back in. But you really want to do some stuff with this car during the test drive. So be sure to accelerate fairly rapidly. Make sure it's got enough horsepower, it's got enough giddy up and go for you to safely pull out and merge into city traffic, right? Sometimes you don't have a whole lot of time in order to pull out and start getting going. And then make sure you find a safe stretch in the road where you can hit the brakes relatively aggressively. Make sure the brakes aren't squeaking. Make sure the brakes actually stop you in a relatively short period of time. Just kind of checking out the vehicle in different scenarios. Now, I know right now it's January, and so the first thing when you step inside the car, you're probably going to turn on the heater, right? But also check the air conditioner. You want to make sure you always check both sides of the system, because car dealerships are sometimes notorious for not fixing problems like this, right? So they're not going to fix the air conditioner if it's the winter, because they just assume that you're going to buy it and not really test the air conditioner. And then, 6 months later in the summer, when you find out that this thing never worked to begin with, well, that's your tough luck. You already bought the thing. Make sure you hit all of the different buttons, switches, knobs up in the dashboard. Make sure you check all of the windows, roll them all the way up, all the way down. The automatic door locks, just kind of play with all of the different buttons and make sure that all of the different functions function properly. Make sure the cruise control works. Make sure the radio works. Turn up the volume rather loud. A lot of times, especially if the car has previously been a rental car and people listening to super loud music, the speakers might be blown out. And in that case, at low volumes, the speakers might sound still, decent or whatever, but it becomes extremely noticeable that your speakers are shot when you try to turn up the volume on that stuff. So be sure to test everything in a wide variety of ways. Don't just take the car around the block and call it good. And if you're someone that's really susceptible to the smell of smoke, then you're obviously going to want to check the ashtray in the car to see if there's any signs that somebody has been smoking in this vehicle. Now, obviously, the car dealership is probably going to, do a pretty good job of cleaning up the car and getting it showroom ready. So probably they're going to do a good job of cleaning out the ashtray and all that kind of stuff. But there is a second place to check and see if this car has ever been smoked in. And this can be fantastic, especially because, it's January, so it's cold outside. So a lot of times you can't really smell smoke in a vehicle when it's cold outside, and it's usually not really noticeable until temperature gets a little bit warmer, and then all of a sudden like, whoa, my car smells like smoke, what's going on? So what you're going to want to check is roll down the window on the driver's side and kind of check in that little groove, that ledge, all that kind of stuff in between the rubber where the window goes. Because a lot of times, people are just kind of flicking their ashes out the window, right? And a lot of those ashes go straight out the window, but some of them fall straight down into those little grooves and crevices along the window. And this is one of those nooks and cranny areas that most car dealerships aren't going to wipe down this area when they're getting this vehicle showroom ready. So if this car was previously smoked in, a lot of times you'll see significant evidence of ash in these areas. All right, so number 4, if everything else up to this point checks out and you're interested in potentially purchasing this car, the last thing that I would recommend you doing is take this vehicle to a mechanic that you know and trust and have a pre-purchase inspection done on it. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to do a full head-to-toe look at this car. They're going to check the brakes, they're going to check the fluids, they're going to check the transmission, they're going to check the lights, they're going to check pretty much everything that they can check and make sure everything is in good mechanical working order. And while having a good pre-inspection doesn't necessarily guarantee that your car won't have issues in the future, it can give you a pretty good idea of not only how this car was used and maintained up until this point, but it can give you insights into anything that might be slowly starting to go bad. So it might give you some insights into what sort of maintenance you might expect in the short term. Now, if you found this video useful, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment down below, give the video a thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm, and as always, I'll see you all again next time. Thanks.